The diamond glittered mockingly in the Instagram photo, catching the Caribbean sunlight as my stepsister Rebecca posed with her new husband, my ex-fiancé James, on their honeymoon in Bora Bora. The same ring that had been on my finger 3 months ago before everything fell apart. But I really need to go. In the quiet of my apartment, away from Rebecca's cruel jabs and Diana's subtle digs, I could think clearly for the first time in weeks. Grandma Ruth had never done anything without a reason. Rebecca's laughter followed me to the door. Running away again? You always were pathetic. No wonder James chose me instead. I didn't respond, didn't look back as I walked to my car. They wouldn't see the tears until I was safely away from their perfectly manicured lawn and carefully curated family dinners. The drive home to my small apartment was a blur of streetlights and memories. I thought of Grandma Ruth, of our Sunday afternoons spent going through her jewelry collection as she told stories of each piece. The sapphire pendant Rebecca now wore so proudly had belonged to Ruth's mother, a woman who'd crossed an ocean with nothing but her children and a box of precious jewels sewn into her coat. The jewelry box sat on my dresser when I got home, exactly where I'd left it this morning. It was beautiful, even empty, hand-carved rosewood with intricate inlay work. Rebecca was right about one thing. It was all I had left of my grandmother. I picked it up, running my fingers over the familiar patterns as I had so many times as a child. Grandma Ruth had always kept it locked, the key on a chain around her neck. Some treasures, she told me, are meant to be kept safe until the right moment. The box had been delivered to me the day after the will reading, along with a letter from Ruth's lawyer stating it was my only inheritance. Rebecca had laughed when she saw it was empty, claiming the good jewelry for herself. But something about the weight had always felt wrong. I sat on my bed, turning the box over in my hands. They make such a beautiful couple, my stepmother Diana cooed, scrolling through more photos on her iPad during our weekly family dinner. And look at her dress. So much more elegant than that vintage thing you were planning to wear, Sophie. My father studied his wine glass intently, avoiding my eyes as he had since that disastrous day when I found my grandmother's restored 1950s wedding dress in shreds. The dress I'd spent months carefully restoring, only to discover it destroyed 2 days before my wedding. The same day James announced he was in love with Rebecca. Speaking of dresses, Rebecca's voice rang out as she swept into the dining room. Fresh from her honeymoon and glowing with triumph, I have something to show you all. She pulled out her phone, displaying more wedding photos. I forced myself to look, to not show how each image felt like a knife to the heart. There was Rebecca in her designer gown, James gazing at her adoringly. There they were cutting the cake at the Plaza Hotel, where my wedding was supposed to be. And there, in the background of one shot, was my grandmother's antique jewelry box sitting on Rebecca's dressing table. Grandma Ruth would have loved the wedding. Rebecca sighed, touching the sapphire pendant at her throat, another piece from my grandmother's collection. It's so sad she passed away before she could see it. My hands clenched under the table. Grandma Ruth had been my last true ally in this family, the only one who'd understood what it was like to be pushed aside by Diana and Rebecca's arrival in our lives. She passed away just weeks before my planned wedding, before she could see her restored dress destroyed, before she could watch her grandson-to-be marry her step-granddaughter instead. "Oh," Diana exclaimed, picking up her phone. "The lawyer just emailed. They finished processing Ruth's will. Everything's been transferred to the appropriate accounts." My stomach twisted. The will reading had been delayed due to some complicated legal issues, but I already knew what it contained. Diana had made sure to tell me repeatedly how Grandma Ruth had left everything to Rebecca, the jewelry, the family heirlooms, even the old Victorian mansion where I'd spent so many happy summers. "Don't look so glum, Sophie," Rebecca smirked, adjusting her sapphire pendant. "At least you got to keep that old jewelry box, the empty one," she laughed, "though I suppose that's fitting. Empty box for an empty life." I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I should go, early meeting tomorrow." "But we haven't even had dessert," Diana protested. "I made your father's favorite chocolate souffle." My father finally looked up, his expression pained. "Sophie, I'm sure it's delicious," I cut him off, grabbing my purse. She'd never been cruel or thoughtless, even when my father remarried and our family dynamics shifted. The memory surfaced suddenly, a Sunday afternoon shortly before she died. She'd been showing me how to restore the wedding dress, her fingers trembling slightly as she demonstrated a particular stitch. First National Bank hadn't changed since I was 16. If she or her daughter were ever found to have committed fraud against any family member, they would forfeit all claims to the family estate. There it was in black and white. Rebecca and Diana's careful plan to ruin my wedding and steal my fiancé. The payments to the wedding planner to change arrangements. The accidental spill that ruined the dress. Even emails between Rebecca and James dating back months before our wedding was canceled. I picked up one of the USB drives. And these? Security footage, emails, text messages, everything documenting how your stepsister and stepmother orchestrated the destruction of your grandmother's wedding dress and manipulated James. Your grandmother had them washed for months after she became suspicious of their behavior. My hands didn't shake anymore as I read through the reports. Mr. Chen used his master key, and the box slid open. Inside was a thick manila envelope, several USB drives, and a smaller jewelry box. On top was another letter in Grandma Ruth's handwriting. Open the envelope first, darling. I broke the seal, and documents spilled out onto the viewing table. As I read, my eyes widened. Mr. Chen, I whispered, is this real? He nodded gravely. Every word. Your grandmother spent years putting this together. She wanted to be certain. The documents told a story that made my head spin. Bank statements, private investigator reports, photographs, and legal papers, all revealing a truth that would shatter Rebecca and Diana's perfect world. The prenuptial agreement, I said, holding up one document, the one Diana signed when she married Dad, was very specific. Mr. Chen finished. Same marble columns, the same hushed atmosphere, the same air of old money and discretion. I arrived at 8:55 a.m., the golden key clutched in my hand, and asked for Mr. Chen. Ah, Miss Sophie, the elderly banker smiled warmly when I was shown into his office. I've been expecting you. Your grandmother said you'd come. He looked exactly as I remembered, immaculately dressed, wire-rimmed glasses, with kind eyes that missed nothing. I showed him the key. Excellent, he said, standing. Follow me, please. The vault was in the basement, behind a series of increasingly secured doors. Mr. Chen's keycard beeped us through each one until we reached a room lined with safe deposit boxes. Box 1947, he announced, stopping before one of the larger boxes. Your grandmother was very specific about this. The box can only be opened in my presence, and the contents can only be revealed to you. My hands trembled slightly as I inserted the key. Remember, darling, she'd said, sometimes the most important things are hidden in plain sight. You just have to know where to look. I thought she was talking about the dress's delicate beadwork, but now, my fingers found a slight irregularity in the box's inlay, a place where the pattern didn't quite match. I pressed gently, and there was a soft click. A hidden compartment sprang open in the bottom of the box, revealing a folded piece of paper and a small golden key. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper, recognizing my grandmother's elegant handwriting. My dearest Sophie, if you're reading this, then you've remembered what I taught you about looking beneath the surface. Good. You'll need that wisdom for what comes next. The key opens a safe deposit box at First National Bank, box number 1947. Go there tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp. Ask for Mr. Chen. He's been our family's banker for 40 years and knows what to do. And Sophie, remember what I always told you. A lady plans ahead, keeps her strength hidden, and strikes when the moment is right. All my love, Grandma Ruth. I read the letter 3 times, my mind racing. First National Bank was where Grandma Ruth had done all her banking, where she'd taken me to open my first account when I turned 16. My phone buzzed. Another Instagram notification. Rebecca posting more honeymoon photos, tagged #blessed, #perfectlife, #living my best life. I smiled for the first time in weeks, tucking the letter and key safely into my purse. Grandma Ruth had taught me many things over the years. How to restore antique lace, how to make her secret recipe tiramisu, how to carry myself with dignity in the face of cruelty. But most importantly, she taught me that timing was everything. I set my alarm for 8 a.m. Whatever was in that safe deposit box, I had a feeling it would be worth the wait. After all, Grandma Ruth had never done anything without a reason, and she definitely never left anything to chance, especially not when it came to family. But the will? I started. Mr. Chen smiled. Ah, yes, the public will. But your grandmother filed a second will, triggered by specific conditions. Would you like to see it? He handed me another document. This one made me gasp. She left everything to me. The house, the assets, everything. Conditional on proof of malicious interference with your wedding, he confirmed. Which we now have. The sapphires your stepsister is so proud of wearing, they're technically stolen property now. I thought of Rebecca's smug face at dinner last night, of her endless Instagram posts flaunting her perfect life. When can we file this? The paperwork is ready. But your grandmother left specific instructions about timing. He handed me another envelope. She said you'd know when the moment was right. I opened it to find one more letter. My darling Sophie, if you're reading this, then everything I suspected about Diana and Rebecca has been proven true. The evidence in this box is your sword and shield. But remember what I taught you about timing. Diana thinks she's won. Rebecca believes she's untouchable. Let them believe it a little longer. The higher they climb, the harder they'll fall. The USB drives contain everything you need. The blue one is especially interesting. It seems Rebecca has been keeping secrets from everyone, including her new husband. Watch. Wait. Then strike when they least expect it. Oh my love, Grandma Ruth. According to 2 months after discovering Grandma Ruth's safe deposit box, I sat in my stepmother's immaculate living room, watching her prepare for Rebecca and James's housewarming party. Diana was arranging flowers in a crystal vase, my grandmother's crystal vase, while chattering about the event. Everyone who's anyone will be there, she gushed. Rebecca's invited all of James's banking colleagues. She's even convinced that darling Marcus to come, her investment advisor. Such a clever man. I smiled, sipping my TV's records about 2 years. Starting right around the time she began pursuing your fiancé. 2 years. While she was destroying my relationship, my wedding dress, my life. She'd been building her own house of cards. My phone buzzed. Another Instagram post from Rebecca. Living my dream life with my dream man. Sorry, not sorry. The photo showed her wearing Grandma Ruth's sapphires at some expensive restaurant. I smiled, gathering the documents carefully. Mr. Chen, I'll need copies of everything, and I'd like to retain access to this box. He nodded. Of course. Your grandmother has arranged for all fees to be paid in perpetuity. She was quite insistent that you have a secure place for sensitive materials. As we rode the elevator back up, I thought about timing, about patience, about the perfect moment to strike. One more thing, I said as we reached his office. Can you recommend a good forensic accountant and perhaps a discreet PR firm? His smile was knowing. Your grandmother left a list of trusted professionals. Shall I contact them? I nodded, thinking of Rebecca's stolen sapphires, Diana's fraudulent prenup, and James's coming realization of who he'd really married. Yes, I said. I think it's time to start putting things in motion. After all, Grandma Ruth had taught me well. A lady plans ahead, keeps her strength hidden, and strikes when the moment is right. And thanks to her foresight, I had everything I needed to make that moment perfect. Please check the small jewelry box. Some traditions shouldn't be broken. With trembling fingers, I opened the small box. Inside was my great-grandmother's diamond and pearl ring, the one meant to be passed down to each generation's bride, the one Diana had claimed was lost years ago. Your grandmother wanted you to have that for your real wedding day, Mr. Chen said softly. To the right person, at the right time. I slipped the ring onto my finger, feeling its weight, its history. Then I reached for the blue USB drive. Mr. Chen, can we look at this now? He connected it to a secure laptop. What we found made me catch my breath. Bank statements showing regular transfers from Rebecca's private account to offshore accounts. Emails between her and someone named Marcus. Photos taken by the private investigator showing Rebecca meeting the same Marcus in hidden locations, including 3 days before her wedding to James. Your grandmother's investigators were very thorough, Mr. Chen noted. They followed the money trail. It seems your stepsister has been running quite a sophisticated investment fraud scheme, and Mr. Marcus appears to be more than just her business partner. I thought of James, who prided himself on his successful investment banking career, who had no idea his new wife was not only cheating on him but potentially implicating him in financial fraud. How long has this been going on? According to these records, about 2 years. starting right around the time she began pursuing your fiancé. 2 years. While she was destroying my relationship, my wedding dress, my life, she'd been building her own house of cards. My phone buzzed, another Instagram post from Rebecca. Living my dream life with my dream man. Sorry, not sorry. The photo showed her wearing Grandma Ruth's sapphires at some expensive restaurant. Before she could respond, Diana clinked her glass for attention. Everyone, thank you all for coming to celebrate Rebecca and James's new home. If you'll all proceed to the dining room, dinner is served. I checked my watch, 8:30 p.m. Right on schedule. The dining room was a scene of calculated elegance, crystal glasses, fine china, and elaborate flower arrangements. James held court at one end of the table, deep in conversation with a distinguished-looking man I recognized as Marcus from the surveillance photos. My phone buzzed silently, a message from Mr. Chen. All in position. Perfect. Dinner proceeded exactly as Rebecca had planned, each course more elaborate than the last. She was just standing to propose a toast when the doorbell rang. I'll get it, I offered, rising before anyone could object. I opened the door to find 2 SEC agents, the forensic accountant Mr. Chen had recommended, and a very serious-looking detective. Ms. Romano, one of the agents, showed his badge. I smiled, gathering the documents carefully. Mr. Chen, I'll need copies of everything, and I'd like to retain access to this box. He nodded. Of course. Your grandmother has arranged for all fees to be paid in perpetuity. She was quite insistent that you have a secure place for sensitive materials. As we rode the elevator back up, I thought about timing, about patience, about the perfect moment to strike. One more thing, I said as we reached his office. Can you recommend a good forensic accountant and perhaps a discreet PR firm? His smile was knowing. Your grandmother left a list of trusted professionals. Shall I contact them? I nodded, thinking of Rebecca's stolen sapphires, Diana's fraudulent prenup, and James's coming realization about who he'd really married. Yes, I said. I think it's time to start putting things in motion. After all, Grandma Ruth had taught me well. A lady plans ahead, keeps her strength hidden, and strikes when the moment is right. And thanks to her foresight, I had everything I needed to make that moment perfect. 2 months after discovering Grandma Ruth's safe deposit box, I sat in my stepmother's immaculate living room, watching her prepare for Rebecca and James's housewarming party. Diana was arranging flowers in a crystal vase, my grandmother's crystal vase, while chattering about the event. Everyone who's anyone will be there, she gushed. Rebecca's invited all of James's banking colleagues. She's even convinced that darling Marcus to come, her investment advisor. Such a clever man. I smiled, sipping my tea. Yes, I've heard quite a bit about Marcus. My calm tone made Diana pause. Sophie dear, you're not still upset about everything, are you? It's been months. You really should move on. Oh, I have moved on, I assured her. In fact, I'm looking forward to tonight's party. It should be quite memorable. She missed my meaning entirely, beaming at what she took for acceptance. That's the spirit, though perhaps you should skip it. It might be awkward. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The party was at the Victorian mansion, my grandmother's house, which Rebecca and James had redecorated in what she called modern luxury style. Gone were the vintage wallpapers and antique furnishings replaced by chrome and white leather. Only the family portraits remained at Diana's insistence on maintaining some heritage. I arrived exactly at 8, wearing a vintage dyer dress I'd found in Grandma Ruth's preserved collection. The house was packed with James's banking colleagues, their wives, and Rebecca's social media followers who'd been deemed influential enough to make the guest list. Sophie, Rebecca's voice carried across the foyer. I'm surprised you came. She air-kissed my cheek, the sapphire pendant glinting at her throat. Love the dress. Vintage, right? So, we have some questions for Rebecca Chen Harrison regarding certain financial transactions. The silence in the dining room was absolute as I led them in unique. Thank you, I smiled. It was Grandma Ruth's. Like the sapphires you're wearing. We have some questions for Rebecca Chen Harrison regarding certain financial transactions. Something flickered in her eyes. Uncertainty? But her smile never wavered. Of these old things? James bought me much nicer pieces on our honeymoon. Speaking of James, I glanced around. Where is your husband? Networking with some clients. Marcus is helping him pitch a new investment opportunity. She smirked. Something you wouldn't understand, of course. Oh, I understand more than you think. The silence in the dining room was absolute as I let them in. Rebecca's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Mrs. Chen Harrison, the detective, stepped forward. We have a warrant to search these premises and to seize certain items, specifically family jewels that were fraudulently obtained. I don't understand. James stood, his banker's instincts kicking in. There must be some mistake. No mistake, Mr. Harrison. The forensic accountant opened his laptop. We have documentation of an extensive fraud scheme involving offshore accounts, falsified investment returns, and misappropriated client funds, all traced back to your wife and her partner, Marcus Stevens. Marcus was already edging toward the door, but 2 more agents appeared to block his exit. This is ridiculous. Rebecca's voice rose shrilly. Diana, do something. My stepmother stood, her perfect composure cracking. Now see here. Mrs. Peterson, I cut in, using Diana's maiden name. I'd be careful what you say next, especially given the terms of your prenuptial agreement regarding fraud against family members. The color drained from her face. How did you? Grandma Ruth was very thorough, I said, pulling out her letter. She documented everything. Your conspiracy with Rebecca to ruin my wedding. The destruction of the dress. The manipulation of James. She had you both watched for months. You're lying, Rebecca sputtered, but her eyes were wild. James, tell them. James was staring at his phone, where an agent had just shown him photos. Rebecca with Marcus in intimate situations, bank statements showing millions in missing client funds. The sapphires, I nodded to the detective. And the rest of my grandmother's jewelry. They're evidence now. As Rebecca was forced to surrender the necklace, I turned to the stunned dinner guests. I apologize for the disruption, but I thought you all deserved to know where your investment money has really been going. The next hour was chaos. Agents seized computers and documents. The forensic accountant explained to James's horrified colleagues how their client's money had been funneled through Rebecca and Marcus's scheme. The detective documented each piece of stolen jewelry. Diana collapsed onto a white leather sofa, watching her perfect world crumble. This house, everything, belongs to me, I finished. According to Grandma Ruth's real will, the one triggered by proof of your fraud. James finally approached me, his face ashen. Sophie, I had no idea. I know, I almost pitied him. Almost. Check your own accounts, James. Carefully. Rebecca's been using your credentials to access client funds for months. As Rebecca was led away in handcuffs, still screaming about her innocence, I climbed the stairs to my grandmother's old room. It was the only space Rebecca hadn't redecorated, perhaps out of some lingering superstition. I sat at the familiar vanity, opening the jewelry box that had started everything. The hidden compartment now held a new letter, one I'd written myself. Dear Rebecca, a lady plans ahead, keeps her strength hidden, and strikes when the moment is right. Grandma Ruth taught me that. She also taught me to watch, to wait, and to let people reveal their true selves. Enjoy the prison jumpsuit. Orange is such a unique color on you. Best wishes, Sophie. My phone buzzed with news alerts. Socialite arrested in multi-millionaire at night. I slept in my old room in the Victorian mansion, surrounded by the echoes of 3 generations of strong women. In the morning, I begin restoring the house to its former glory, replacing Rebecca's modern luxury with the warmth and history she tried to erase. My phone buzzed one last time, a message from James. That night, I slept in my old room in the Victorian mansion, surrounded by the echoes of 3 generations of strong women. In the morning, I begin restoring the house to its former glory, replacing Rebecca's modern luxury with the warmth and history she tried to erase. My phone buzzed one last time, a message from James. She turned to go. I called after her. Diana? The dress you helped Rebecca destroy. It wasn't just any vintage dress. It was the one my mother married Dad in. The one Grandma Ruth saved for me. She flinched, finally understanding the true depth of what she destroyed. Dollar fraud scheme, society wedding ends in scandal. Bride accused of investment fraud, family fortune returns to rightful heir after fraud exposed. I smiled at my reflection in the vintage mirror. Somewhere I was sure Grandma Ruth was smiling too. Deanna found me there an hour later, after the guests had gone and the agents had taken Rebecca away. We have to leave, don't we? Her voice was small, all pretense gone. Yes, I stood smoothing my grandmother's dress. The prenep is very clear. You have until tomorrow evening. She nodded, defeated. Your father knows everything. The agents are talking to him now. I'm sorry for everything. You deserve better. I replied with a photo, my great-grandmother's diamond and pearl ring, back on the right hand, where it belonged. Some traditions were meant to be kept. Some legacies were meant to be protected. And some revenge was best served not just cold, but with perfect timing and impeccable style, just as Grandma Ruth would have wanted.